behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal, to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the 5th of 19 candidate forums for the 2021 general elections in the Cayman Islands, being hosted by the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce in association with Fosters. My name is Mike Gibbs, and I have the honor of being the current president of the Chamber of Commerce, and I will also be one of the panelists asking the questions this evening, along with Joanne Lawson, Secretary of the Chamber. I'd like to begin my opening comments by welcoming each of the Newlands candidates, Roy Del Carter, Raul Gonzalez, Wayne Panton, and Alva Saku, and thanking them for accepting the Chamber's invitation to participate in this forum. Your willingness to appear on the same platform demonstrates to voters that you take the democratic process seriously and are ready to respond to a series of questions on the top issues as identified by a recent online Chamber survey. More than 400 responses and more than 200 questions have been submitted via the survey, and these will help to frame the questions for this evening's forum. There's certainly not enough time to ask all the questions, but we will do our best to cover the topics that have been identified as the most important to the Cayman Islands and the Newlands constituency. When the Chamber was established in 1965, the goal was to create an organization that supports, promotes, and protects the interests and welfare of its members and the wider community. Being nonpartisan, we have hosted forums every election year since the 1988 election. So for 9 elections, we have provided members of the community with an opportunity to hear from their candidates and educate themselves before Election Day. These forums have taken weeks of planning and preparation, with all the credit going to the hard-working Chamber staff, but would not have been possible without the financial support of our sponsors, Fosters, Affinity, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART. So a big thank you to them. I'd also like to extend a wholehearted thanks to our media partners, Cayman Mile Road, Cayman Life TV, Radio Cayman, Government Information Services, and ICCI FM for agreeing to broadcast tonight's forum. It is the first time that we have live streamed the forums on the internet, and we hope that this new format will enable even more people to watch them in the comfort of your home. It is now time to begin tonight's forum. I will therefore turn the proceedings over to Will Pinault, CEO of the Chamber, who will serve as this evening's moderator, and he will now explain the rules of the forum and introduce the Newlands candidates.
Good evening, candidates.
Good evening.
The rules for tonight's forum are as follows. Each candidate will be asked a series of questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer if you choose to do so. Each candidate will be allowed to answer the question without interruption and is free to differ with an opinion or position of another candidate during your allotted response time. Candidates are asked to deal solely with the issues, and at the conclusion of the forum, each candidate will be allowed 2.5 minutes to deliver a closing statement. I'll now introduce the candidates for the Newlands constituency. Begin with Mr. Wayne Panton. Mr. Panton is the son of Newlands through and through. Wayne still lives in the community with his wife and son. He is passionate about his people and his country. He is also an avid fisherman who loves the ocean and the environment. A former attorney at law, Wayne decided to enter the political arena in 2013 as a member of the Progressives Party and was successful in his first bid. He was subsequently appointed Minister for Financial Services, Commerce, and Environment and served in that position for one term. Although he did not retain his seat in the last general election, Mr. Panton continues to serve the residents in the Savannah Newlands community. He has kept his Savannah Newlands Community Office open, which is managed by Ms. Heather Bodden, who is campaigning for a seat to represent Savannah Electoral District. Together, they have been addressing various issues in the area. Mr. Panton and his wife are the founders of the Alex Panton Foundation, a not-for-profit with the primary objective of raising awareness of mental illnesses affecting children and young adults in the Cayman Islands, with a particular focus on anxiety and depression. Welcome, Mr. Panton.
Thank
you. Mr. Roydell Carter worked in the local banking industry for over 5 years after leaving the Cayman Islands High School. He also worked at the Cayman Islands Government Department of Environmental Health for 30 years, with the last 16 years as director of the department and chief environmental health officer prior to retirement in 2018. Mr. Carter is now an entrepreneur who operates a small health and wellness business. Mr. Carter previously served on several boards and committees, such as the Tourism Accommodation Board, Liquor Licensing Board, and Hazard Management Cayman. Mr. Carter also served as Director of Community Services and Youth Services with the Rotary Club of Grand Cayman. He has directly and indirectly contributed and participated in several charities and community events in Newlands and island-wide. Mr. Carter has a bachelor's degree in environmental health from Illinois State University, a master's degree in occupational health and safety management from Brunel University, London, UK, and a pending Doctor of Business Administration from the University of Phoenix in the United States. Mr. Carter is also a British Chevening scholar. Mr. Carter is a keen sportsman who previously played local football with East End United and represented the Cayman Islands national men's football team locally and internationally. He and his family have resided in Newlands for approximately 20 years. Welcome. Raul Gonzalez, Jr. is the first of 4 children and was born and raised in Grand Cayman, Cayman Islands. He belonged to a family that upheld Christian values and love radiated among them. In pursuit of a strong education, Raul attended the CCC School and John Gray High School. Mr. Gonzalez has spent his entire adult life as an entrepreneur. He is not afraid of trying new business ventures. He is guided by the quote, "If you have never tried, you will never know." Raul is a family man who takes pride in ensuring that his family, employees, and friends are comfortable and happy. He enjoys water sports, cycling, cooking, and board games. He loves to share and assist where possible. These qualities are aligned with the fact that he is a devout Christian and a member of the Cayman Islands Baptist Church.
Thank you.
Mr. Alvis Suku is an incumbent member of Parliament for Newlands. MP Suku was elected as the first representative for the single-member constituency of Newlands in 2017, which marked the first elections in the Cayman Islands under the one-man, one-vote system. He was elected to Parliament, then the Legislative Assembly, in 2013 to serve as a member representing the former multiple-member district of Boddentown. During his political career, Mr. Suku has served as Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Member of Parliament for Newlands, 4th elected member for the District of Boddentown, Counselor to the Minister of Home and Community Affairs, Counselor to the Minister of Health, Sports, Youth and Culture, and Counselor for e-Government. Since 2017, Mr. Suku has earned a certificate in law from the University of Essex and will complete his LLB honors in December 2021. MP Suku has 20 years of private sector experience in financial services and technology and 8 years of parliamentary experience. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from DePaul University in Chicago and a Master's of Business Administration from Syracuse University in New York. Mr. Suku is a devoted father of 2 daughters. Now that I've introduced the candidates, we're going to take a short commercial break, And when we return, we'll begin the questioning of tonight's candidates. Please stay tuned.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right, and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for Newlands. I now turn it over to President Mike Gibbs and Secretary Joanne Lawson, who will present the questions for this evening's forum.
Thank you, Will, and good evening once again, candidates. The first question will be addressed to Mr. Panton, and then each of you will answer that same question in turn. The question will be up on the screen, and the first one relates to qualifications. And what skills or qualifications do you possess that makes you the candidate of choice for the constituency of Newlands?
Well, thank you for the question. I have considerable experience as a minister in government formally. I understand the way government works. I understand the issues that are typically faced and the process through which these issues are resolved. I also have had considerable management experience in my previous life as a partner in a law firm. And, one of the things that I've enjoyed most about my previous experience as a government minister has been helping people. I found that it was something that I enjoyed more than anything that I had done in the past. So it is a purpose that I'm driven to come back into politics because I want to try to make the country better, try to address a lot of the issues for the betterment of the people, and to try to make the lives of everyone, not just in my constituency, but the whole country better.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
Thank you for the question. I bring with me a wide range of skills and qualifications. Formerly as the Director of the Department of Environmental Health for many years, I was responsible for an entire department, staff, budget, project management, and a number of other relevant issues. In addition to that, my banking experience related to financial matters and the ability to work with others gives me a wide skill set. My qualifications in the field of environmental health and health-related matters in environment and matters relating to the environment also gives me a broader set of skills that qualifies me, along with my knowledge, to become the candidate of choice for Newlands.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you. I want to thank the panel for having us, the chamber. I want to thank my constituency, my supporters. The skills that I bring is I'm a businessman, entrepreneur. I have been entrepreneur all my life in the Cayman Islands. Like I said, I'm an entrepreneur. I've did business all my life in the Cayman Islands. I've dealt with people of all walks. I've managed a few different companies. The qualities that I bring that that's going to make me the candidate choice for Newlands is I've lived in Newlands for 20 years. 4 years ago, I decided to be the voice for the constituency of Newlands. I've seen their struggles and the issues that Newlands is facing. I am of Newlands. 4 years pass, nothing has changed. I'm bringing the qualities that I want to represent. I'm willing and able, and he who feels it knows it. And like I said, I'm feeling it with my people in Newlands. They know the struggles, and they need someone there to fight for them, someone to represent them, express their concerns, and deal with the issues. It's not for me to decide. It's for the constituency wants to decide. God willing, if they elect me, I will be their voice and I will represent them to the best of my abilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sakum.
Thank you. And I wanted to say good evening to all of my constituents who I think are tuned in and watching this, and thank the chamber as well for having us, and also say good evening to my the gentleman to my right. There's a reason why there are no qualifications in the elections law of the Constitution to stand for office other than the obvious, criminal history and that sort of stuff. It is because the parliament of the country is made up of people who represent the common man. My qualification, my primary qualification, is that I have a desire to serve. And that is what made me step forward in the first place, to serve the country and to serve my constituency. That is the only real qualification that you have to work by, to go with. I do have formal qualifications. Obviously, you just read a number of them out, my MBA, my bachelor's, my work experience. But primary, first and foremost, it is your desire to serve and to make the lives of the people that you serve better. I think I have that qualification. I think I've demonstrated that throughout the past 8 years. And before that, I have been there with my constituents through all sorts of ups and downs, through the deaths, the births, the storms, the pandemic. I think I've demonstrated clearly through my track record where I stand as far as representation goes. I have also represented this country internationally. I was blessed to be part of the negotiation team to go to London to negotiate changes to our constitution, which the end result of which is that we now have full autonomy for domestic matters according to the constitution. That was a huge achievement for the government and for the Cayman Islands. I was pleased that I was selected to be part of that delegation. So I've served this country nationally and locally, and I know I have what it takes to continue doing that and to deliver for my constituents and to continue to grow to be a better representative.
Thank you. Joanne will ask the next question.
This question is on national issues, and we'll start with you, Mr. Carter. What one or two national issues would you seek to address in your first year in office?
Thanks for the question. There are quite a number of national issues, I guess, at this stage for which one could respond. But let me take up the issue of the pandemic and COVID-19. Obviously, the pandemic last year has caused a lot of chaos and havoc around the world. The Cayman Islands certainly has not been spared. While the government has been doing a good job overall, I think, so far, we need to be careful about how we open back the country, what speed we open it at, and the other factors that we need to take into consideration. As with any basic epidemiological triad, basically it requires a host agent and the environment, and the key of resolving issues is to break any one of those cycles and to control the disease. We have been successful in doing so far, but we need to continue to be vigilant, and we need to be cautious about the variations, the different strains of the virus, which, while we are currently locked down, so to speak, the whole issue of increased travelers without certain restrictions can expose us again to the new variants and put us at risk. So we need to be mindful of that. I know a lot of people are eager for us to open our borders, but CDC and the other organizations similar to that has also issued a similar caution to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you for the question. You're asking for one or two issues, but we have a whole heap of issues. It's like a puzzle, and we need to put all the pieces together because they all interact. Education and employment is a major one. Pension and health insurance is another one. Cost of living. These are all the things that are affecting our people on a daily basis. And not to side from the pandemic, but that's an issue. Yes, we're dealing with that. But these are the everyday issues that are affecting each and every one of us in the Cayman Islands here. And these are the issues that are not affording the Caymanians to live a quality life, live the Caymanian dream. So for me, all these issues is something that we have to tackle right away. As a get-in, the government has to start to address these issues because they're not going away. They've been there for a long time, and they're just compiling. The pandemic has just made things worse also. So for me, it's the mirror of issues, all of them. It's not one more important than next. We need every one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saku?
Thank you. For the next 2 years, I think this country is going to be dealing with the pandemic in one way, shape, or form, either getting through it or recovering from it. There are obviously a number of issues that have been highlighted by going through this process of dealing with the pandemic. Nationally, we have to look at what we're going to do about pensions. We have allowed people to take money from their pensions to survive. That pensions were already, I think, inadequately funded to take most of our seniors through their golden years. So we needed to look at that anyway, but now that the situation is definitely, we have to accelerate what we do. That has to be top priority. We have to look at things like border control. We may be faced with another pandemic. We don't know there's a lot of uncertainty there. What we have to do is revamp border control processes so that when there is another threat, that we detect it early, that we protect our borders early. We have to look at workplace legislation to make sure that companies are able to operate in a manner that they're not impacted by another pandemic. We have to look at how schools operate. One weakness that was exposed through the pandemic is that the schools were not ready for remote learning. Our internet infrastructure, again, remote work, remote learning, all of those things now need to come into focus quickly because we never know when the next pandemic is going to be around the corner. There's the impact on businesses. We have to continue to support our businesses. We have to continue to support persons who are out of work. We need to start focusing on retraining people, getting people back into another line of work. We need to look at how we do that quickly because there are many people who are relying on a stipend, which is, they're grateful that they're getting their $1,500 a month, but it's not going to take them very far. And also the government can't continue to do that forever. So we need to retrain, retool our people, get them working again. We also, of course, need to deal with cost of living. I see I've run out of time, but I'm sure I can get back to that one pretty soon.
Thank you. Mr. Panton?
Well, thank you very much. I think in the short term, in the first year, we're probably looking at issues around cost of living, and which have been really amplified because of the impacts of the pandemic around the world. It has had a huge impact on most of our supply chains that come into Cayman. We don't produce very much. We don't grow very much. So it has had a very, very significant impact, both in terms of the foods that we consume, but also construction costs and those types of things. I think, there are different things that we can do to address it. We have to take some very careful, do some very careful analysis and take some steps to address these. Construction costs, for example, these issues they tend not to go down, right? So we have got to find ways of improving the efficiency of construction. Something like, for example, the numbers of electrical boxes, plugs that are in every 6 feet. These types of things tend to drive up costs 10 or 20%. If you ask some of the contractors, these are things that they're concerned about. That then has an impact on overall cost of construction, and that translates into the cost of rent, cost of building houses. Our young people are very afraid that they are losing their opportunities to participate in the Cayman Dream, to have access to housing, to participate in the development of their education, and then moving on to having families in their own houses. They feel that the country is on a path like a runaway train. People are falling off, and nobody seems to be that concerned about it. So there's a lot of concern around that. Education is an issue that I think we absolutely need to address.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question shifts from national issues to more constituency level issues. So this question will go to Mr. Gonzalez first. If elected, what 2 or 3 projects or programs would you like to accomplish for the people of Newlands?
Thank you. The first thing we're going to do is form a district council. I by myself can't do everything. So we'll have a district council, and through that, now we could address the issues of Newlands. First and foremost, bus shelters for our children. Far too long now, they've been overdue. Kids are going to school. If it rains, they get wet, they got to go to school. Not every parent could afford to sit down and wait for their children and keep them safe. They got to get to work. So the bus shelters is the first thing that we're going to do throughout Newlands. The second thing is the parks. We have 5 parks in Newlands, and they don't add up to 1 park. And why I say that is they don't have no amenities, no restroom facilities, no Wi-Fi, no CC cameras to make sure that your children are safe, no one's doing what they're not supposed to do, no proper benches, no proper play sets. So as the district council and as a member of Newlands, we want to tackle these things to improve the quality of life in the community. Not everybody could, after a hard day's work, come back town to come to one of these parks. We got them there. So we want to deal with the parks. Same thing with our launch and ramp. That's the most used launch and ramp that we have in Newlands. Everyone from Lower Valley, Spot, Newlands, Prospect, Bordentown comes here. We got the heart of the North Sound, Jewel. Our launch and ramp don't have no bathroom facilities. So that's something I want to tackle, beautify our launch and ramp, put some CC cameras over there too, make sure that people feel safe when they leave their vehicles there. No one's going to vandalize it. No one's going to come there after hours, do anything. No one's stealing trailers.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saku.
Thank you. I think top priority for Newlands has to be floodwater management. I've been dealing with flooding for the last 4 years. We've even had to deal with the king tide situation where we had saltwater flooding. What that has uncovered is that drains just don't always work. What we need is a proper floodwater management plan for the constituency. That is going to involve a lot more complex of a solution. some drains, some culverts, some pumps, all that sort of stuff. I'm concerned about rising sea levels and climate change over time, but that has to be top priority. Another area that we really want to start working on is, I have a lot of constituents who are elderly, who live at home. We don't have senior daycare facilities for elderly. A lot of elderly people stay at home all day. They're lonely. They don't have company. They don't. In some cases, don't have people to come and bring them a hot meal. That could be easily accomplished, easily done in a very short space of time. Just not a residential facility, but a daycare where you could drop your seniors there. They go out on excursions. They can talk to other seniors. They can spend time together. Improve their quality of life. We need a third primary school in Bottomtown. I've been spending a lot of time at the primary school myself, and I've spoken to parents and teachers. I spend a lot of time on the ground talking to teachers. We have a classroom overcrowding situation that is growing. Newlands is one of the fastest growing areas in the island right now. And if we don't make preparations for a third primary school, the situation is only going to get worse over time. So those three things, I think, have to be top priority.
Thank you. Mr. Panton.
Thank you very much. For me, it's a combination of those things. The parks absolutely have to be addressed. There were a number of parks that were put in place 10 or 12 years ago. They have basically deteriorated to the point where they cannot be used. I have been working on cleaning up the parks, putting in place, redoing the fencing, which had been destroyed over time, working to put in place new resources for the kids to play on, different the play sets and recreational equipment. I also want to have beautification throughout Newlands. It adds immensely to the quality of life of the people of Newlands to have a beautiful place. It adds immensely to the value of their homes, maintains the value of their homes. So those are things that absolutely have to be done, and those are things that I have been working on, trying to address the trash problem, trying to keep the roadsides clean. I think we do need a flood management plan. What has been happening with the current situation with the NRA activity and the current representation for the district or the constituency is that the solution seems to be just drilling deep wells. That's not going to help. We're too shallow there. The water level is too high. So we have to have an approach that resolves the issues without just relying on deep wells. We also need to address the issue with Savannah School, or the Joanna Clark School as it is now. Joanna Clark was an icon in the education field in Cayman, and I think a school that has had failing grades for the last 3 assessments is not good enough for her name. It's not good enough for our children. And I think we have, as a people, the parents, the children, the teachers, and the private sector, we need to get in there and resolve those issues and address them so that our children get the best possible education from a primary level.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
Thank you. I agree with the parks, the upgrading of the parks that don't have any facilities at all. The lunging ramp has been there. It seems at times to have insufficient lighting as well. I noticed that the boat ramp was recently refurbished, but in terms of refurbishing that, created a potential hazard as well with the shredded, with the mine material being spread on the ground, which posed an environmental threat. The other matter there is, yes, certainly flooding and drainage is a problem in Newlands. I know that for a fact. I have been flooded out for many years. These things are not new. They have been existing in the community for years. And the current and former representatives were quite aware of these matters as well. but to date, a number of them remain outstanding. We need to act on these matters instead of just saying what they are. The constituents of Newlands have been suffering. The kids have to walk through water in the rainy season. I noticed that some drains were recently installed. And yes, if we install some of the drains in a rush, or if we do so improperly, we are going to end up with other problems. I note too that some roads were recently paved, and I say that's a good thing when it is done well. But some of the residents especially on Water Street, while they're enjoying the nice paved road at this time, will suffer when the rains come later on.
Thank you.
Mr. Saku, we'll start this question with you. Education governance is a topic. Would you ever support changing the governance structure of the education system, or should we maintain its current structure? If yes, what would be some of your recommendations?
And that's a good question. The current governance structure, I think, has served us to a point. We haven't really focused on, we make a lot of changes. We do things like change curriculum quite often, change the system quite often, but we don't often give it enough time to settle and to see the results. I would really like to see education not become so political going forward. I think a governance structure where you have an authority that is dealing with education, so regardless of which politician comes along and when, you at least have a plan, a set plan that you're working on, and achievable goals. Because making education too political, I think, has hurt our children in the past and will continue to hurt them. So I would support a governance structure that took the politics out of education so that we can focus on things like unifying UCCI and ICCI. We shouldn't have two university colleges competing with each other over a very limited pool of potential students. That only drives up the cost of getting education at those institutions. We should be looking to bring those together, focus on what they do best, don't have them competing with each other. Things like focusing on special needs, children with special learning needs. We've missed the boat on that one. A lot of our kids, an increasing number of our kids, have special needs, learning needs, and we're not addressing those. We don't have teachers adequately trained to deal with it. The red tape that is involved, the bureaucracy that is involved in identifying a child with special needs and coming up with a plan to address that can take as much as 2 years under our current system. That's 2 wasted years of a young child's life. That we need to focus on getting rid of the red tape, streamlining our education system, taking the politics out of it. I wholeheartedly support that. There obviously has to be political direction involved and individuals on that level where you have a minister who's responsible for education. But the ongoing development of education, I fully support taking the politics out of it.
Thank you. Mr. Panton?
I think education is so important that I agree that we should not have politics involved with it. The problem is we have a system with education which is probably one of the few ministries where you have, a department and then you have the schools and the heads of the schools and the teachers. There seems to be a lot of conflict at times. When you talk to a lot of the young Caymanian teachers that come back, they go away, get training, come back, they want desperately to contribute to the education of our children. They want to be a part of the solution to developing the Caymanian workforce. And they end up leaving after 3 or 4 years or less sometimes because of frustration. These types of things have to be pointing us towards problems with the way the system is structured. I've been disappointed when I see someone who says, well, I'm the minister today and I get reelected and I'm going to run away from the ministry on the next occasion, because I feel that if you are sure about your approach to education, there should be the continuity. They should want to come back and make sure that that is implemented. I agree there's too much changes that goes on. I agree that there's inconsistency. I agree that the changes that are made all the time can't be helpful. Changes in curriculum all the time that can't be helpful. There has to be some consistency, and I think we need to bring together all the key stakeholders and really try to examine exactly what needs to be done to address this problem of stop spending so much money of government's money on our children and attaining so little compared to the private sector. The private sector schools have models that actually work and they're able to deliver. We need to figure out why government's model isn't working as well as the private sector model does.
Thank you. Mr. Carter?
Thank you. I agree with most of the content of Mr. Ponton and some of my other colleagues in regards of the governance of education. I do agree that it should be a separate entity governed by a board so that there can be consistency. Over the years, there have been so many curriculum changes that I think it has confused everyone. We are a British overseas territory, and I strongly believe that our examination and our educational system should follow similar paths. I think we should focus with the GCSE, CSEs, and the other similar qualifications, and let's build on that. Certainly when it comes to the social services and history components, let's focus on the Cayman Islands and perhaps the wider Caribbean, because I can recall going to high school and learning a lot about New Zealand and Argentina, what were the main products and so forth over there, but yet were not taught the basis of anything related to the Caribbean. So we've come a long way, I agree with that, but we need to stop twisting and fuddling with the curriculum. I believe that the teachers themselves, by the time they get into a system, they have to change it. And it's not that they perhaps are not qualified to do their job. It's just the constant changes causes them to have another excuse rather than focus on the education of the children, rather than put all of the emphasis on ensuring that the students learn math and English and all the other key skills. I think if we can focus on those, get back to the fundamentals, get back to the principles that we need to adhere to improve the education.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez?
Education is the key. It's the start for everything. That's the problem we're having here now. We keep passing the buck over. And we're talking about every time there's a new administration, they changes the curriculum. This curriculum ain't working. Our kids are failing, and we're doing an injustice to them. 60 to 70% of our kids graduating can't read and write. What we need to do as a government is start to take action. Give the schools and the teachers the resources that they need in order to help the children. We need to put programs in place that are going to identify them from primary levels, their strong points, their weaknesses. We need to implement the trade schools and push it, not just talk about it, push it. We cannot continue passing on kids from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're not passing the exams. And we're just passing them through the system. And when they graduate out into the real world, and they're not ready. So for me, I don't want to pass the buck on. The government needs to lead. We need to get parents involved. They need to be more involved and held accountable. It's going to take all of us, parents, teachers, the government, the island in a whole, because we're failing our kids. And who are we building this place for? It's for them, the future. They're the ones going to take over. And if we don't prepare them, they can't take over. So education is key. And like I said, I want the government, we hit it and start to do what we have to do. Emphasize, give the resources to the schools and the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will be addressed to Mr. Panton first, as in the area of traffic improvements. The question is, roundabouts are contributing to some of the largest traffic bottlenecks in several locations as motorists struggle to enter the flow of traffic during rush hour. Would you support eliminating some of the roundabouts and coming up with different solutions that will speed up travel from Newlands to Georgetown?
Well, I think I'm not sure that the roundabouts are necessarily our problem. Our problem is that we have way too much traffic and we have way too many cars on our roads. The approach to dealing with the traffic situation is to try to build more roads. Roundabouts can work effectively, provided that people understand the rules. So perhaps there needs to be more education around that. But the simple solution is that we have way too much traffic going on. The rush hour traffic in the morning and then rush hour traffic in the evening going home is atrocious. It's wasting a lot of our time, and it's creating a lot of quality of life issues for particularly people that live out east, in Newlands and Savannah and North Side and East End. So we need to deal with addressing the volume of traffic. That is going to require us taking on board improvements to the public transportation system. We have to do that. Then we need to start limiting the number of cars on the roads, whether it's through putting in place a system of saying you can't bring an automobile and register it and drive it if you are on a work permit, up until year 3 or something like that. Those are initiatives that we need to take to limit the amount of cars that are in there. I don't think it's just a question of the bottlenecks caused by the roundabouts. It is definitely far too much traffic, and we don't even have open borders at this point. I mean, that's the scary thing. If we had a normal economy and open borders and the normal flow of traffic, including tourism, imagine how much worse it would be. It is a very frustrating thing, and it's a huge quality of life issue, and it is something that we absolutely need to address.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
To answer the question specifically, my response is yes. I would look at least on relocating the Hurley's roundabout. That seems to be a major bottleneck going east and coming from east as well. If there was another location, whether it was a roundabout or a different mechanism, it would have to be in the region of the Red Bay area. I believe that if we were to eliminate that roundabout by Hurley's, shift it to the area by Red Bay, then we will be able to pull off all the traffic that's going towards Hurley's, the new development, Red Bay, and also send the traffic through to the Prospect Road. And then we would be able to use the main highway as it was intended to be. Obviously, the number of cars on the road contributes to the problem. We should start to consider or have some incentives to deal with carpooling, although now maybe, unless it's your immediate family, it could be a concern due to COVID. We need to have perhaps express bus lanes, wherever that is possible. I would consider that to be something that would be considered along the new east-west arterial road. Perhaps the 2 inner lanes could be used as express bus lanes going east and west at that location. And perhaps we should be able to have parking away from Georgetown and then shuttling into various areas of Georgetown. I think a combination of those things would be a good start to alleviating some of the traffic congestions that are on the roads.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you. For me, before we go into moving roundabouts, I think we got to try other stuff first. We should try staggering the work hours. Everybody's coming to work the same time. We should work on the school hours too, because everybody's going to school the same time. So it's something that we have to look into: school hours, work hours, a public transport system, a properly functional public transport system. You know, we don't need to invent the wheel. We just got to bring it here and tweak it. It works all over the world, right? I would agree with, like my colleague said, a parking space and shuttle into town. A system like that, I think, would work good too. I would also agree with what my next colleague said about not everybody get, the cars, the work permit holders. Should be some time before they get a car, because everybody has a car. And our infrastructure just can't handle the cars. So before we go into any massive spending of roads and roundabouts and stuff like that right now, I would think try these little initiatives right now. And during COVID, it's shown that you could work from home and stuff too. So I would push for people to work from home a couple of days out of the week where they can. 2-3 days, that would help. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saku.
Thank you. My opinion is that roundabouts work when used properly. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who don't use the roundabouts properly, and that adds to the traffic congestion. But as far as bottlenecks go, I mean, I know that there are two major ones. The Hurley's roundabout, especially in the evening when people are trying to come east, and there's traffic coming in from South Sound that has the right of way. That causes a stop right there by Hurley's. The other one is when you're going west in the morning, down on Thomas Russell Way by the horse stable. That narrows into 2 lanes, one going each way. That's another bottleneck. So those two have to be addressed. But we're never going to build roads to build ourselves out of this traffic problem. I agree we have to have proper public transportation. I actually brought a motion to the House asking for that revamp to be done. And it was accepted by the government, and they have embarked on that public transportation revamp exercise. Obviously, elections came up on the time frame, and things didn't get to where I wanted it to be. But I raised the issue in the House because I recognize that we have to do something about traffic. My constituents sit in traffic every morning on their way to Georgetown, and they call me. They have a lot of time to sit in traffic and call their MP and complain about the traffic. So I'm well aware of what's going on. Public transportation is a solution that we must rush to get in place until you have a reliable system that gets people where they're going on time, where they want to go on time and reliably. We're always going to have traffic. At that point, then we can start looking at other policies, limiting the number of cars imported and so on. But we can't have business come to a standstill because people can't get where they need to go. So public transportation is key. And then you can bring the other policies afterwards.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes the first round of questions, the 5 questions of the candidates. At this time, we're going to take a short break to promote some of our sponsors. So please stay tuned. We'll be back with the next round of questions.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right, and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
You hear people talk about the economy all the time. But what is the economy exactly? The economy is the flow of money between the people, the companies, and the government in the Cayman Islands. Why is it important to understand the economy? Well, just like the engine of a car, the better we understand the economy, the better we can make it run, and the more prosperous we can become as a community. The first important thing to understand about the economy is that the private sector is the main source of all wealth. Think about it. Most people work for companies in the private sector, both big companies and small businesses. But even if you work for the government, your salary comes from the fees and duties paid to the government by private sector companies and their employees. That's why we call the private sector the prosperity engine that powers our economy and drives the country forward. When business is booming, companies have more money to spend on salaries, bonuses, and promotions. Employees with more money buy more products and services from other businesses. All those people and businesses spending money generates revenue for the government, which pays for important services like education, roads, emergency services, and care for the elderly. So when the private sector is doing well, everyone does well. But when the private sector isn't doing well, like during a recession, the money dries up and everyone suffers. So when you hear people ask, how do we make our country more prosperous? The answer is pretty simple. Grow the economy. After all, you can't get more money from a system that isn't making more money. That's not economics. That's just common sense. In this video series, we're going to take a closer look at our economy to see how we can fuel our prosperity engine and how to make sure everyone benefits. For now, thanks for watching, and remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for the constituency of Newlands. Gone through the first 5 questions. Now we turn it over to Joanne to begin the questioning of the next 5.
Mr. Carter, this one will start with you. Reopening borders. Would you support allowing the reopening of certified accommodations if a safety criterion is met, such as staff vaccinations, sanitation protocols, etc., prior to a full reopening of the borders to all arrivals? Why or why not?
Thank you for that question. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to proceed with caution in that regard. Having said that, that is the approach that the government has been taking already in terms of when we are at a particular stage that there's certain easing of the requirements to enter the country. But like I've said earlier, we need to be cautious with that. It's just that the new variants, we still don't have sufficient information on that. But I believe that we will get to the stage, and I hope it's sooner rather than later. But in any case, I don't foresee us rushing to that stage. There will be certified locations, and that could be one approach. And I think as the world and the people gets vaccinated and it becomes more of a commonplace, in fact, I think one of our largest tourist population comes through United States and Canada. So given where they are and how soon they can get their vaccination in place. And according to some recent reports, it seems as if they have targeted July for that to happen. Given that particular situation, then I think we should be able to, if the requirements are met, that we would be probably looking sometime in the summertime, although that is no certainty. But I believe at that time we'll be in a better position to make such a decision.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you. I would support on a small scale. If all the criteria are being met, and I say small scale, has to be controlled because we're a small place. If it gets out, by the time we try to figure something out, it's too late. And we've come too far to make that happen. We are living in paradise. We are blessed with all that has transpired. Every day, every week, we're learning something new on this. I understand that our tourism, people are feeling it. People are struggling. But we have to, as a government, find other ways to help these people, other avenues, and we have to do it now. I think with all the stakeholders, land and sea, the hotels come up with like a package, stay over tourists, that we could control their movements, where they go, who's involved and stuff like that. A small scale, because at the end of the day, we have to think about the big picture, the rest of the Cayman Islands. So not to say that we're not counting, we're saying that the tourism doesn't matter. It does, but we survived after Ivan. We're still surviving now. But we're learning, like I say, every day, every week, something new on this. So before we jump the gun, we got to make sure that all our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted and our people are safe. That's the bottom line. Our people has to be safe in whatever we decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Suku?
Immediately, no. My answer would be no. And I'll tell you why. We have now probably vaccinated almost half the population. We haven't vaccinated enough people. You can still transmit the virus while you have the vaccine in your system. You may not get sick, but you can pass it on to someone else. So until we get to an acceptable level of vaccination throughout this population, I wouldn't support doing something like this. It's too risky. The government has done an amazing job in keeping us safe. I will be one of the first people to say that. If we were to go back into another lockdown situation, or if we were to start having people get seriously ill here, we're lucky we've only had 2 deaths. If we start to have mass illnesses and so on, it would be not just an economic disaster, but a health disaster for us. We can't handle anymore. We're still in a bubble. We're still not able to reopen our economy fully, but we're safe and we're surviving. So for the time being, until we get to a satisfactory level of vaccination for the entire population, I would say no, it's too risky.
Thank you. Mr. Panton?
I have considerable concerns about it as well. I mean, I don't know what is meant exactly by certified accommodations, but if we had a scenario where, you know, staff could remain within a facility and all in one type facility, that would be a different thing. But whether they're vaccinated or not, we all know that is going to prevent them from getting sick and probably dying, but it doesn't prevent them from being able to transmit it outside of that facility. So if they can freely come and go, there is the risk of an outbreak. And I agree, we have not gotten to the point where we are able to we've been able to vaccinate enough people. There are still people there's still many of our people who are vulnerable, and the risk of a potential outbreak is, to me, too great right now. Frankly speaking, where we're at has been difficult for a lot of people. But I feel that the government, if you look at the full totality of the circumstances, the government has 400 million plus in reserves still. We have a debt to GDP ratio of around 5%, just over 5%. That is extremely low. I think if anything, we need to make the necessary investments in helping people to get to the point where we are in a safer position, where we have most of our population vaccinated, where we look at the gateway countries that are coming into Cayman, like the US primarily and the UK, and assess where they are with their vaccination programs, where they are with their level of community transmission. We don't want to take any chances. We have done a good job. We've followed the medical advice. This is not a time to experiment and make serious mistakes. I fully understand the issues with some of the businesses, but I think lives have to come before finances.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will be addressed to Mr. Gonzalez first, and touches on to the subject of cost of living, which we've already talked about a little bit. Cost of living ranked as the top issue of the respondents in the most recent Chamber survey. So the question is, what strategies would you propose to address that issue?
First, thank you. The first thing we got to do too is we got to establish the Consumer Protection Board. We got to push on our national energy plan and not just talk about it. We got to push it like it's a runaway train, because it's only going to do good for everybody. We got to address our minimum wage. We got to deal off-rig. Off-rig needs to be reformed, reviewed, enforce the policies that are there. You know, CUC is a big factor. Fuel. And that dictates everything. Groceries, you name it, everything. It dictates. Insurance, everything. So we got to find ways where we could get cheaper fuel. We got to push for, like I say, the energy plan. We got to, I want to start a program in Newlands, but on a national level too. Backyard farming. We got to be more self-reliant. That would give us more disposable income. You don't have to go to grocery stores. You're farming your own stuff. Same thing on a national level. Again, health insurance needs to be addressed. I think we should have a national health plan, because that's another big factor for everybody. The insurances are just outrageous. So that's something that I would want to look into right away. And again, employment. Get our people employed in quality jobs where they could afford to live and not struggle. Educate them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saku.
Thank you. A little known fact is that just about half of our working population earns less than $3,600 a month. To qualify for NAU assistance, your household income has to be $3,000 a month or less. That is where we are. That's our starting point. And it has existed for a long time. We have a middle class that is disappearing into poverty. And it's been going on for quite some time. I can't blame any one government, any one administration. This is historical. We need to tackle cost of living more from a minimum wage point of view, because minimum wage only impacts those right at the bottom. There's a much wider range of people at the top. How do you do that? Education, training. It was never the design, the plan for our people to be earning minimum wage. And I know I keep hearing the stories that, we should be able to do minimum wage jobs and survive. I heard one candidate actually say that the Caymanian can survive on minimum wage. I know very few people that can survive on our current minimum wage. Our focus has to be on uplifting our people. Focus on training and education. But we can tackle specific things, like the cost of health insurance, which is ridiculous right now. For a family of 4 people, you're looking at thousands of dollars sometimes just to get basic coverage. Our seniors are the most impacted by this. I know what a senior with a pre-existing health condition pays for health insurance. We need to look at solutions, and national insurance may be one way, but I think that may hurt the insurance providers more than help. We need to look at a plan where we separate the seniors from the rest of the population. That would bring down premiums right away for majority of the people in this country. Maybe then look at a solution where, because of that savings, some of that savings can then be contributed into a fund to manage the healthcare costs of the seniors. We have to be creative with how we do this. Just saying national insurance is good, but you have to look at how realistic that proposal will be. Cineco was never designed for that. It's going to be like pushing a boulder uphill to get Cineco to revamp and change. We need to do something about this quickly. Off-reg needs to be given the teeth to deal with the fuel suppliers once and for all. Off-reg can go and look at your books and see what drill down into what you're charging for fuel, but they can't do anything about it. We need to upgrade that legislation so that they can do something about it. Consumer protection. That's, without having to say much more, consumer protection is needed.
Thank you. Mr. Panton.
Thank you for the question. Honestly, the cost of living is something that there is no silver bullet. There's no magic wand that's gonna fix our issues with cost of living. But there are lots of little strategies, some we have discussed, that can be utilized, which in aggregate can make a meaningful difference. I'll come back to those, but the other issue is, as has been mentioned, minimum wage. Minimum wage has been $6 an hour for at least the last 6 years. When it was first put in place, the committee that recommended a number, I think, came up with around $7 an hour. The reason it was set at 6 was to avoid a concern of inflation. This has been $6 for 6 years has been far too long. It was supposed to be reassessed after 1 year. It hasn't. That has to be one of the priorities. We have to address that. Insurance is absolutely an issue that has to be examined as well. That the average cost for a family is probably between $1,500 and $2,000 a month if you have decent insurance. If you have the basic, that helps, but it barely gets if you have problems, if you have any special illnesses. So we've got to look at a lot of different strategies to try to address it. I mean, one of the things is, as I mentioned earlier, housing has gone up so dramatically. The value of land has gone up so dramatically. One of the reasons for that is we have a completely open system where anybody can come and buy land and own it indefinitely. We need to limit that. If you buy a piece of land to build on it, then if you don't build on it within a year or two, then you need to be able to sell it so that it goes back into the supply, and it stops ratcheting up values to the point that Caymanians feel they have no hope of ever achieving anything.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
Thank you. Certainly, cost of living is a challenge. It's not an easy solution. But let us not use that as an excuse. Let us try to be bold with some of the solutions. Let us tackle the health insurance. If it needs to be universal or comprehensive, revised, whatever needs to be done, let us do it. Let us deal with the high costs of the utilities in this country. I believe that paying bills each month takes a significant part of the resources that the people earn. And being on minimum wage, let's just get it done. A phased-in approach certainly would be ideal over 3-4 years to get it up to a level which should, in my opinion, should at least be a minimum of $10 to $12. But that will need to be worked out. It appears that the current minimum wage is a conversion or close to it of the U.S. minimum wage. So presumably they are waiting until the U.S. raises their rate and then ours will follow. But, it is time that we start to lead rather than always trying to come from behind. Let us be leaders in this as well. The cost of living, certainly, we need to upskill and train some of our people. I've known people who have worked in the same job for years. Why not let's get them upgraded to another level so that they can earn more? Let's start the food security program, farming, agriculture, and other technical and vocational courses so that we can at least give new opportunities in new areas where we can actually have the people earn a higher means of living.
Thank you.
Mr. Suku, we'll start with you. Environment is the topic. What measures would you recommend to protect our terrestrial and marine environments?
Well, I think that we've actually done quite a bit in terms of protecting terrestrial and marine environments. We now have a conservation law in place and a conservation board, and I will give credit to Mr. Panton for that. He steered that through and got it put in place, and I think it's working. Obviously, we need to be a bit more, I think a bit stronger on the enforcement side of things. I keep reading about incidents where people are removing mangroves without permission. People are destroying natural habitats without permission, or not without permission, but basically doing things against what the law was intended to regulate. We need to be a bit stronger on the regulation side of it and the apprehension and the punishment for doing it. But I think that it's working. If you look at the East-West Arterial as an example, you're going to see that that road goes down to Woodland Drive and then stops, and there's going to have to be an impact assessment done. So I think we've gone far enough that we should go with the legislation. To go any further would tip the balance, I think, too far. I am an environmentalist by nature. I want to protect our natural environment. I think the marine parks expansion has come into place now and is working. I know that we need to do a bit more to protect the marine environment. We need more enforcement, and I think that, again, is where the problem lies. People still go out and poach conch and lobster out of season, so we need more strength on the enforcement side. We need to put the resources there in protecting from that point of view. I know that the National Trust has a brilliant program for the blue iguana recovery, where they're actually encouraging people with land to grow food that the iguanas need to eat. Then they harvest that and feed the iguanas. So maybe put things in place so that there are more of those spaces available to help the iguana recovery. Things like that I think will help. But legislative-wise, I think we've gone pretty far.
Thank you. Mr. Panton?
The National Conservation Law has a lot of potential to address the protection of our terrestrial and marine environments. However, the marine parks expansion, for example, has not been put in place yet. The marine parks expansion that was consulted on by myself and when I was in the previous government for weeks on end, going to many different districts, having a discussion with all stakeholders. That was a proposal that was left in place at the time of the 2017 election. That has not been dealt with. There were promises made, I think, around 2018 to someone no less than Prince Charles that, we were going to have this put in place, and it hasn't been done. So there is a disappointment there. We need to address these issues. The approach that has been taken with marine parks is to have an expansion so that you have basically no fishing areas. That will then eliminate or reduce the need to go out and continuously check to see whether somebody is in a particular area and taking the wrong type of species and whatnot. If they're not supposed to be there, it's easy for them to enforce. They can go in there and charge them, remove them. So the marine parks expansion is an essential part of leaving in place what we have and protecting. Since 1970, we've lost about 80% of our marine environment and species. It is not serving us well. Our terrestrial environment is ignored. The recommendations that are made to the CPA are oftentimes ignored. We've just had a situation where the National Conservation Council was not properly reinstated and new members appointed when we had one of the very significant planned area developments that was being brought to the board. These things represent a failure of commitment to the environment for the future on behalf of the current government. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Thank you. Mr. Carter?
Well, I agree there are a number of pieces of legislation in place that can help protect both the terrestrial and the marine environment. But one of the challenges that often comes with that is the lack of enforcement or the inability to enforce. I know that from the environmental health legislation, in particular the litter law, while it sounds very good and very comprehensive as to the things that we can do, enforcement has always been an issue. One of the ways I think we can implement enforcement is to revise the legislation and include the ticketing approach, as the police can just ticket on the spot. I think we need to have immediate solutions rather than dragging the process through the courts, because that's a never-ending situation, it seems like. We need to deal with the waste management more broadly in this country. It has been a hot issue for many years, and honestly, it should have already been dealt with. Too many ministers, representatives in the past have shown only a peek at the problem. Even though, and I say that because within my 30 years in government, I had a minister practically every 2 years. So 15 ministers in 30 years. So there's always a constant turn around and turnover with actual who to do what and what to do it. But we really need to deal with that aspect and resolve that. I am prepared to take on that challenge and get it done.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you, John. There's so much to be done. The legislative that they have now ain't working. The planning laws need to be reviewed and reformed. Who are we building Cayman for, and what are we building? We have no plan. Everyone's coming here, buy what they want to buy, build what they want to build, tear down what they want to tear down. Lack of enforcement, and lack of the laws too. So those laws are extinct now. We got to change them. And the marine, people come here and just fish. This is the only place anyone could get off the plane and start to fish. We need to put some licenses in place. Leave that for locals. People are poaching because no jobs. Again, they need to feed their families. They need to pay bills. Not saying what they're doing is right, but it boils back down to education. It boils back down to employment and opportunities. We need to, like I say, help our people so they wouldn't resort to these things. They're not doing it just because they want to do it. It's a need that has to be filled. They have kids that need to be fed. Light need to be paid. It's the reality of what we are struggling here in the Cayman Islands. The everyday bills. Insurances need to be paid. And the things that we have right now for the Marine, it's all good, yeah. But like I say, in everything, it can be improved. But it still ain't working too. We should be talking, we should be doing lobster farm, conch, shrimp, excesses, throw it back into the North Zone to replenish what we have. 10 years from now, our kids are not going to know what a lobster is all about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, which will be addressed to Mr. Panton first, is specifically related to Newlands. And the question is, what is your vision for the future development of Newlands?
Well, Newlands has typically been a very quiet, very diverse residential area. And Savannah, which is a complement to it, has had a mix of residential and commercial development. From my perspective, I don't see the need to significantly change that. So I think that Newlands, what I'd like to see for Newlands is a significant enhancement of the quality of life aspects. I want to see the parks being put in place, as I mentioned before. I want to see beautification so that people come into an environment where it's beautiful and it's clean and it adds to the value of their properties and they can enjoy the quality of their lives. Obviously, there are issues. Newlands is fairly low-lying. We need to be concerned about sea level rise. We need to build resiliency into the planning that goes in around there. It will have an impact if we don't do that. You know, the Florida Keys, for example, they've found that for every mile of road, it's going to cost them $60 million to raise it. We need to bear these types of issues and these types of experiences in other places in mind when we are dealing with planning for the area. And we need to implement a proper drainage system to make sure that the flooding issues are addressed. As I said before, deep wells are not going to be the solution. Not the only solution, at least. So I see Newlands as a thriving, beautiful residential development where families can enjoy themselves. There's much more interaction. I'd like to see people not just being a bedroom type area where people go to sleep and go to work and go back. You know, there needs to be much more interactions. What's interesting to me is the time I spend out talking to people, they don't know a lot about their neighbors. So we need to change that. But Newlands as a whole needs to be a very beautiful, lovely, primarily residential area with little in the way of commercial development.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
Thank you. My vision for Newlands is to see an integrated constituency where the people live together, have the appropriate amenities, facilities, proper roads, facilities, and a proper with toilet facilities, parks, lively, and community. I want to see a Newlands where we become the model constituency for the Cayman Islands. I want to see a Newlands where we can make a big difference in people's lives. A Newlands where we can have a few places where, including bed and breakfast facilities. I would like to see the structure, the big steel structure at the end of the North Zone completed and into a viable business. I would like to see the back of there in Newlands develop with cabanas, so that their elderly could take walks over there, or that the caretakers can take them there to get some fresh air, and for youth to have a place to relax. I want to see the parks in Newlands fester and with young people. I want to see a dynamic community, although it's a residential community. I want it to be one that is integrated and one where people are inclusive regardless of who they are. I want to see a Newlands where people of all races, color, creed can hang out and live together and have fun in the process, while at the same time protecting our children, ensuring their safety, and ensuring that they have proper living, a good quality of life.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mike. The future and development of Newlands. We're going to start with the parks, the bus shelters, the launching ramp. Like I said, the district council. And most important, too, we're going to unify Newlands. Newlands need to be unified. We're segregated. Everyone lives in their bubble. Work and home, and everyone is in their little area. That has to change. I want to see, and I'm praying, unification amongst us all. The rich, the poor, the middle. I want to lay out a plan. It's going to call Help Your Neighbor. And that's to unify us and help one another. I want Newlands to be the star of the Cayman Islands. Newlands, I want to see a substation, a police station up there, a clinic, an ambulance, a fire truck. We all know in emergencies, time is of the essence. We don't have these things. We're the fastest growing area. Everyone's coming up here to live. So I want to fight for these things. Newlands, we want to tackle the flooding. Yes, that's a concern. And it's all about just bringing us together. That's what I want to see, bringing us together and work together and leave no person behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saku.
Thank you. I'll start by addressing, I know we keep mentioning parks, just so that everyone's aware. The parks are actually, most of those parks are private property. They're owned by the developer of a lot of those homes. What I've done recently is actually arranged an agreement where those parks are can be transferred or will be transferred over to government so that they can be properly maintained, and I can actually be justified in spending public funds on those parks because they're private currently. As far as the future of Newlands goes, yes, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we have a looming threat in climate change. So we need whatever development we do, whatever plans we make, we have to take into account what effect that will have on our coastline. And it could be devastating if it's not managed properly. My vision is that Newlands can become an education center for this country. And I've seen through my travels, through my experiences elsewhere, when you put an educational institution in an area, many support services are then able to develop around that. Your population growth is focused kind of on that area. You actually have people coming into the area to live, to take advantage of education. UCCI, and I keep talking about UCCI and ICCI merging together, making up an institution that would actually attract people from overseas. We have the record for excellence in financial services. We should have the record for excellence in education. As far as the makeup of Newlands is growing very fast. Obviously, we need to focus on infrastructure. The infrastructure needs have not been addressed. I'm not making excuses, but being in the opposition, it's kind of difficult for you to command government's budget and use it to develop infrastructure. So we do need sidewalks in some streets. We need to continue upgrading the streets. I've done quite a few, over 10, 15 streets in the last 4 years. We need to continue making those upgrades and those improvements. Obviously, those things cost money. You have to understand how budgeting works. You have to go and beg for the budget. But, with a proper plan, Newlands can continue to be a great community.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter, we'll start with you. This is about government performance. How would you rate the past coalition government's overall performance on national issues on a scale of 1 being poor and 10 being excellent? What national issue do you believe the government handled well, and what issue do you believe they handled poorly?
Thank you very much for that question as well. At this stage, it's not really my intention to go around rating the government's performance. But with that being said, and putting that into context, I would say that the one issue that I feel that they did well was the management of the pandemic and the COVID, and I mentioned that earlier. And I think most people will agree with that. In terms of, what they handled poorly, there perhaps are a range of things that they handled poorly or below standards. But let me say this. I believe that where we are today could be a consequence of an action that they handled poorly via the calling of the early elections. I believe that with the upcoming election on April 14th, we will be able to form a new government, of which I am hoping and looking forward to being an elected member in Newlands. And on the basis of that whatever the poor matters were that the previous government had, the new government for which I will be a part of will be striving to address national issues. We'll be striving to address the issues that affect people in Newlands, and certainly all of the issues that impacts youth and the elderly. We want to be able to deal with the minimum wage, and any new government for which I'm a part of will be looking to fulfill a wider agenda in making the people's lives in these islands much better.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you, John. The government, I give them a 10 how they handled the pandemic. We are where we are by the expertise, the experts guiding them, and they making the decision. The Premier had to pull the trigger. He pulled it. Forever I'll be grateful for that. He did an excellent job. It was a tough decision to be made, but he made it. And the government in a whole. Where they handle things poorly for me is where we're at right now. The spending of money, the lack of employment, education, things that they should focus more on to help the Cayman people. They spend money on advertising Stingray City. If you don't know Stingray City by now, you're wasting $1 million there. Sidewalks in South Sound, over $1 million. Smith Backer there, spending money there. Not to mention the port, the amount of money they spent on that. That could have helped with education. That could have helped with employment. That could have helped with so much different things. That could have, So for me, they didn't focus on the things that needed to be focused on. And that's it all boils back down to education opportunity for our Caymanian people. They were looking at the big picture and forgetting the small people, us, who's pushing the train. So, like I said, I could only rate them good and where they have us here now. 10 on that. Everything else, they dropped the ball, and our people are feeling that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Suku?
Thank you. Well, I don't think I'm going to get into rating the government performance overall. I think that is a job for the voters in a few weeks. But, you know, if I was to single out one issue where I think the government did a really good job, and obviously I think everybody will agree, this getting us through the pandemic and the continued efforts. But you have to look back too at some of the financial aspects of it. We have the reserves, we have the resources to get us through. So, you know, you can't say that they did a poor job in managing the country's finances. And you have to be fair. We are where we are because of strong financial management. An area where I thought that, and if I had to pick one, it would have been the port, where the government didn't handle that national issue very well. Clearly, we had a situation where we had an attempt to initiate a referendum by a people's group, for people's initiated referendum. And I don't think it should have come to that. I think that, you know, prior to us getting to that point where people were getting very annoyed with the government for trying to move ahead with the port, my call would have been to have a government-initiated referendum immediately on an issue that serious. So I think if I had to criticize, I would say the handling of the port was definitely a disappointment for me. But it all works out in the end, and I've learned in 8 years of politics that things do work out in the end. So, you know, we're not moving forward with the port. I think a lot of people will be happy with that. And we can now focus on rebuilding our tourism product the way it should be. I don't think that we should go for mass tourism at all. I think our focus has to be on limiting the numbers, making the experience better on shore, converting cruise passengers to stay over, focusing more on stay over. That's where we get most of our earnings. So, you know, the port situation started off bad and ended up good in a way.
Thank you. Mr. Panton?
I think similarly, you know, I'd have to rate the government's performance in relation to the pandemic issues as excellent. I particularly, you know, would say that like many other countries, they have access to good advice, the best scientific advice, the best medical advice. Introducing politics is where a lot of other countries found themselves in great difficulties. I particularly was grateful that the politics was left out of it here, and there was a focus on public health safety. You know, I think the work of the government of 2013 to 2017, which I was a part of, put the government, this current government, in a very strong position. You know, we went from having $550 million in debt and zero reserves and a deficit budget to building up reserves, being able to pay off debt. As I said before, getting down to a 5.2% debt to GDP with over $400 million in reserves currently. They also have the facility to borrow additional money if they need to. So the government has been put in a really strong position. They handle the issue really well. What I want to see them do is I want to see them continue to maintain the conservative position of safety and helping people who are suffering more at this point. The price that we're paying for the pandemic is still going on, and we need to continue to support people while we're looking at how we calibrate the reopening if we get to that point, and looking around at the big picture as to, you know, what's happening in the rest of the world. I think my other issue really is, I agree, the port was a major issue. It was a major failing. It was a failure to recognize the view of the people of the country that they didn't want to have mass cruise tourism. They didn't want to pay the price with that kind of environmental impact. The other issue that I think that they handled very poorly was a situation with one of their members who was involved with the assault on a lady, which I am particularly. That was the reason I left the party, and I think there was a great deal of disappointment that they didn't show the right leadership and example in relation to that.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Okay, we've gone through 10 questions, so we're going to take another short commercial break. So please stay tuned. We're going to go through the final, maybe 3 questions. We're not sure yet, depending on time. But please stay with us, and then following those questions, we'll have the closing comments from the candidates. So please stay tuned.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal, to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right, and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Here in the Cayman Islands, the private sector is the prosperity engine that drives the country forward. Just like a real engine. The better we understand how it works, the better we can make it run, and the better off we'll be. To help illustrate how our economy works, let's take a step back in time to when there were only a few thousand people living in Cayman. In those days, most people survived by fishing or farming for food. It was a simple, wholesome life, but it was a lot of hard work. Most people bought what they needed from their neighbors. As people bought and sold things, their individual wealth went up or down, but the overall wealth of the country stayed the same. In a simple economy like this, the only way one person could increase their wealth was by reducing someone else's. In order to increase the overall wealth of the country, one of our Caymanian ancestors would have to sell something, a product or service, to someone somewhere else, and bring that money back home. In other words, we would have to export something. In those days, our biggest export was labor. Men worked overseas or on the seas and brought the money home, thereby increasing the total wealth of the country. Although the economy is much bigger and more complex today, these same principles still apply. Every time a company in Cayman sells a product or service to a customer overseas, the overall wealth of the country increases. Once it's here, it flows around the local economy between the government, the people, and the companies and becomes a part of our society's wealth. The 2 biggest sources of income for our economy today are financial services and tourism, often called the pillars of our economy. Tourists come here and spend their money. So all of the tourism companies like hotels, restaurants, buses, Stingray City Tours that make sure our visitors have a great time are helping to increase the wealth of our country. Just like tourists, clients of financial services firms come here and spend money too. So all of our financial service companies like insurance companies, fund administrators, lawyers, and accountants that facilitate investment transactions for people and companies around the world bring money into the economy and increase the overall wealth. The point is, if we want to increase the prosperity of our country, the best way to do that, in fact, the only way to do that, is to grow the private sector. In particular, the companies at the front lines that bring the wealth here from overseas in the first place. In the next video, we'll talk a little about how money moves around the economy. For now, thanks for watching, and remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for Newlands. We'll probably have time for 2 more questions and then the closing comments from the different candidates. So I'll turn it back over to President Mike for the next question.
Thank you, Will. This question I'll address to Mr. Gonzalez to start. It's in connection with schools and their ratings. Several schools in Cayman, both public and private, have shown consistently poor results in school inspection reports over the years. Do you think a school should ever be put on probation or even closed for poor performance? If so, what are those conditions and who should make that determination?
I don't think we should be closing schools. I think what we need to do is focus on giving them the resources that they need in order to educate and uplift our children. Like I said, it all boils down to education. So we need all the schools that we can, but quality education. We need them. So we can't close down a school. What we need to do as a government, as a people, is give them everything that they need. Whatever it is that they need, the resources and the tools, give it to them. If we have to hold back on 2 roads or 3 roads to give it to education, let's give it to education. That's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saku.
Thank you. No, I don't advocate for shutting down schools, especially when a lot of the systemic problems are not the school's fault. We have good teachers. We have dedicated teachers, but we keep losing them. Why? They get frustrated with the system. I think we need to really focus on eliminating a lot of the red tape that is in bureaucracy that is involved in our education system. We need to ensure that teachers have the resources that they need, but we also need to manage our budgets properly. We spend a lot of money on education in this country. So I don't think that just taking the approach that a school is not performing and shut it down or punish the school is the answer. The answer has to be, let's look at where the bottlenecks are, where the issues are, and fix them. Just using the UK as an example. We are now in the same curriculum as the UK. Their early years education programs prepare their students as they enter the school system for the curriculum. Our early year program doesn't do that yet. We need to upgrade the programs. We need to make them work. We need to look at social and social issues, cultural issues that are connected to education. Right now, especially with the pandemic, what we have, and I'm not saying this is the reason why overall, but we have students who are being raised by grandma and grandpa, mom and dad are working 2 jobs, or single mothers. We have to look at all those cultural things, those social things, and say, well, what is not making education work? We blame parents and say you don't go to PTA. Some parents should. Some parents are not being responsible. But then you got some parents out there who are hustling, trying to put food on the table. All those social issues we need to look at. I brought a motion asking for a study to be done on the economic and social and cultural reasons why our people are not advancing. It was a social mobility study. That study would have provided us with the underlying reasons why our Caymanians are not advancing as they progress in age. Why are they, you went from one generation to the next, the family's economic situation, social situation doesn't change. We need to know what the underlying root causes of these things are before we can address them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Panton.
Well, given that a lot of the schools are full, I don't think it's really an option to close schools, right? Any particular school for poor performance. I agree that we have to work with the schools and try to assess what the problem is. It's unlikely to be a problem purely with teachers. It's unlikely to be a problem purely with resources. It's probably a combination of factors. And we've got to have an education ministry or department that goes in there and assesses exactly what's happening with the school, what are the root causes of the problems, and how do we fix them. I agree that we have to give them additional resources. Government includes in its budget allocations to many of the private schools. Perhaps we have to reassess, having considered what's happening and why it's happening, perhaps we have to reassess where we allocate some of the additional resources. But I don't think as I said, I don't think we have an option in terms of closing them down. I don't know where else they're going to go. We have schools that are being built. We have a school that's expansion of a school, which became an international school. That alone isn't going to make a difference. That's quite expensive. That's not going to be available to many of our people. So we need to take an overarching approach across the public sector as well as the private sector and really try to drill down and understand what's going on, why we have failures, why we have weaknesses, and why, even though there are consistent reviews and the same weaknesses are identified over and over, why those weaknesses are not being addressed. Until we can do that, we're going to be failing our schools, we're failing our students, and we're failing the people of the country. We're failing our future. So we've really got to make an effort to get in there and understand what the root causes are and apply the necessary resources to make it right.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
Thank you. I would say definitely I would not close a school given the circumstances, but let me take a little different approach here. With regards to probation, I think it's fair enough to put a school on probation if they continue to fail. I think the message needs to get across to the entire administration and the education department as well. But yes, if I was to undertake an inspection of a facility, perhaps there would be several issues for non-compliance that I would detect as well. So there needs to be a standard. Everyone needs to understand what those standards are. Having said that, there also needs to be a risk basis for which you would put a school on probation or which you would consider even trying to close a school. The circumstances at each property may differ, but it may be a myriad of conditions or lack of resources or misunderstanding that may be occurring. Yes, finding out what they are, applying appropriate solutions, allowing the institution time to implement them, I believe is a fair way. But if it is that that particular institution continues to fail, this probation is not closing, but it is an early indication to the parents and to the rest of the education community that we really need to focus on upgrading that school, improving that school, and because children need to have first-class education in this country, and for too long it seems as if we continue to neglect them even for the fundamentals of their education. Let's stop that and get these schools up to standard.
Thank you.
Mr. Suku, we'll start with you. This is in relation to Caymanian employment. The current government promised to radically reform and improve the work permit and employment situation for the benefit of all Caymanians. Do you believe they have achieved this promise? Why or why not?
The recent changes in the setup of work, the work department, the implementation of the jobs, National Jobs Clearing House or database, all of that work started when I was councillor under the Ministry of Labour, and I was tasked with being the chairman of the NWDA task force, which is what it was at the time. And a lot of those initiatives started from then when we identified what changes had to be made. So I didn't continue that work because obviously I left the government at that point, 2 years into that term. And the work continued. What I'm seeing now, I think, is the end result of much of that effort, that early effort that was put in place, and those achieved those objectives that they were trying to achieve. I think that there's an improvement overall. I wouldn't say that it's a panacea now and that it's perfect. I do now see where Caymanians are being placed in jobs when they have the requisite qualifications, experience, and skills in most instances. But I still also see, and especially now it worries me, that we're in such a tumultuous time when it comes to the pandemic and employment of Caymanians, and I still see work permits being granted in areas where I know that there's a qualified Caymanian. So I can't say that the situation has improved tremendously. I think a lot more work has to go into making sure Caymanians are getting those opportunities. I'm proud to say that, I was able to contribute to the beginning, the root of this, but it needs to go a lot further. An area where there's a weakness is identifying training gaps, skills gaps in a lot of the Caymanian applicants for jobs. And once those are identified, you need to then provide the training. And that is where we're falling down. We are good at identifying where someone needs help, but we're not good at providing the help. And I think that's the next logical step. We do have some adult Caymanians who are not at the literacy and numeracy levels that they need to be to hold down a job. We need to make sure that that is provided free of costs. I think education across the board, we have to really look at providing training and try to reduce the cost to individuals so that they can progress themselves up the ladder.
Thank you. Mr. Panton?
Well, I guess, the current perception amongst members of the public would leave them, based on the statements recently made, feeling that the current MP was responsible for their sense that it isn't working. Because there are people who are constantly going on social media and making statements that, the system isn't working. That's not really new. It is unfortunate, but we don't, for some reason, seem to have been able to change the perception that Caymanians are getting a fair shake and that the employment and the work permit situation has really improved. Caymanians tend to view it with a lot of suspicion that it is purely a revenue basis for government. And then there are suggestions, for example, that we should increase work permits. So that would basically mean that there'd be less of an incentive to hire non-Caymanians than to hire the Caymanians into those positions. But then the effect of that is that people are going to be paying additional fees, that you're going to have the cost of doing business going up. You're going to have the revenue from the work permits going up, and people are going to, it's a vicious cycle, then people are going to point at it and say, well, see, the same thing's happening. I'm not sure. I don't think that, given where we're at now, I don't think that the changes that have been made have really made much of a difference in terms of those perceptions. We really have to get in there and assess exactly why it is, where the skills gaps are, why it is that employees are not, or Caymanians are not getting the opportunities that they feel that they're capable of fulfilling. I think it's a very significant problem, and one which is really, really important, that and we've got to roll up our sleeves and really get into it to find out exactly how to address that, because the perception is real and it is creating social issues, and we need to really address it.
Thank you. Mr. Carter?
So far, there have been, while it would be true to say that they have radically reformed it, I don't know that I can say with any certainty that it is radically performing any better than it was previously. And it may be because it's a new entity, a new animal, so to speak, still trying to find its way. And but there's still many issues with the work permit situation. Many Caymanians are still not being employed, even though they're qualified. Many Caymanians still are not getting their fair shake. And I think we really need to have a revisit of some areas of that department. The other thing is the work which is associated with that particular department is what they have set up there in terms of people registering and so forth. That is a nightmare. It is a monster. It is pretty much something that I would get rid of. It doesn't serve the purpose, although I understand the intent of it. It certainly is not the right system at this time. I believe, at least in the interim, that the Caymanians should see all of the positions that are available. Let them decide which ones they wish to apply for, not provide all of this information to the system, and yet they still have to go and do all of the application and look in for the different jobs. Let them see the positions from the beginning, and the ones that they want to apply for, let's do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you, John. It ain't working. And we got to ask the question, who's it working for? Because it ain't working for us Caymanians. That's for sure. The work permits are on the rise. Caymanians' employment is on the rise too, unemployed. So it ain't working. It needs to be reformed. Radically reformed. We need to take some radical measures. The Caymanians that are qualified, they need to be given that opportunity to rise to the next level. They're being suppressed. And we all know the work permits is a big money maker for government. They don't want to think out the box. So they ain't going to push. But we need to change that. We got to come up with other measures, making more revenue, another way of a revenue source, and not just work permits, because it's at the cost of us Caymanians not being able to get the education they need, not being able to get the attaining that qualification and the employment. So for me, they've not been doing a good job, and every time we just keep talking about we gotta look into this, we gotta look into that. It's time for action. We got to do action. The reports are there; they just be put on the shelf, and we need to get people who wants to do it, who has the backbone and say, "Listen, this is what we're going to do," and it's for the betterment of our country and our people. That's the bottom line of things. Just get it done for the people. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the candidates. We've gone through 12 questions, so 3 rounds of questions. So thank you very much for addressing the various subjects that we did in these questions that was presented to us by our public survey. So right now we're going to take a short break, and when you come back, we're going to have the closing comments from each of the candidates. So please stay tuned.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right, and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for Newlands. At this time, we're going to have closing statements from each of the candidates, and going to begin with Mr. Wayne Panton.
Thank you very much. To the voters of Newlands, I think that I am an excellent candidate. I have served the country very well in various positions in the past. I have tremendous experience both internationally and locally. I am very familiar with government, with the way it works, and I am very committed to my district, to my constituency of Newlands and the people that live there. I want to serve you. I want to work hard. I want to provide solutions. I'm not going to have all the answers, but I'm going to make sure that I can find the people who do have the answers. And I am certain that I will deliver much better results than you have received in the past. Certainly over the last 4 years, I've been quite disappointed with the level of representation that we've had, both at a constituency level as well as at a national level. I think many people agree with that. Certainly my discussions with people in the constituency, my discussions with people nationally agree with that. So I am about bringing back a level of principles and values and decency to government, to having representation that you can be proud of, that's effective, that's delivering solutions for you, that's helping to resolve your problems, that's serving your needs, that's speaking to you on a regular basis, having public meetings with you every month, every 2 months, every 3 months, whatever it is you would like. I have had an office in Savannah which serves Savannah and Newlands, and it seems like it's serving half the island because many people, many of the existing representatives either have offices that are never open or they don't have any offices at all. And I've been happy to be a part of that. I've been happy to provide services to the people, to be available to them. And I'm going to continue doing that. That office will continue. You elect me, that office will be a center for everybody to get assistance, to get answers, and will be available to you to reach all of us. And I want to provide an integrated approach in relation to Newlands and Savannah in particular, because we are such an integrated community. We have very close links. I think everybody understands that, and that is exactly how we want to move forward. We want representation that you can be proud of. We want representation across the country and nationally that you can be proud of. I don't think you had that, and I think that's what myself and my colleagues offer, particularly with our Community Creates Country theme, because I think having the best communities is going to have an impact on having a very strong country. That's our approach. That's what we promise to you. That's what I'm promising to you as your candidate for Newlands. And I think I'm the best candidate with the best experience, with the best track record, with the best reputation for delivering. Thank you.
Mr. Roydell Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chamber of Commerce, colleagues, family, and friends. This evening, we touched on several national and local Newlands issues. Some were addressed in detail, and others we'll have to continue on the campaign trail. My dear Newlands constituents, you will now have a better choice for change when you elect me as your next representative for Parliament. My skill set, knowledge, and experience equips me well to be your next representative. The former and current representatives have served their time. We have witnessed their failings, their failed promises, when they had an ample chance, an opportunity to deliver on these promises when they formed part of the government. It appeared as if they forgot the needs and well-being of their constituents. Newlands, but guess what? We see them around again, sometimes after 4 years, seeking your votes. But you, the constituents of Newlands, deserves better, and you ought to have better. If you elect me, I will be available, ready, and willing to work for you and with all of you, regardless of who you are, where you come from, what you look like, or whatever your challenges are. I will work with youth, elderly, and with all constituents in Newlands. I will not forget you and your families. I will immediately get to work on your behalf, tackling the issues, bringing about solutions so that we can find ways to improve yours and your family's quality of living. Together, we can make Newlands the model community in the Cayman Islands. I say that it is time that our representatives stop the flip-flop, skip, jump, and hop. It is time that we put a stop to that, Newlands. Let us make the bold move. Let us make the big change, a significant change. The better choice. Vote for me, Roydell Carter, #1. Thank you.
Mr. Royal Gonzalez.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleagues for being here. I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this. I want to thank my supporters, my family, friends, and I want to send a big thank you for my wife. She's my rock. She's my supporter. Newlands, I've been going house to house. I've been laying out my plan. These are issues that didn't just pop up yesterday. These are issues that year after year. You know my plan. You know how we want to execute it together. We're going to do it as a community. We're not going to rely heavily on government. We're going to unify the community, and we're going to do it. Newlands is going to do it. We are going to be the star of the Cayman Islands. On April 14th, you have a choice. If you are happy with the way things are, and you can see a future, everything's going good, leave it the way it is. If you ain't happy and you want change, make that change. You have 4 candidates here. 4 is offering their best. You know what each one can do. April 14th, you pray on it, and you make that choice. Thank you.
Mr. Alvasuku.
Thank you. I want to thank the Chamber for this opportunity. It is a very valuable part of the election process. I think it gives the voters the opportunity to evaluate the candidates and make their own decisions. As for me, I want to continue to serve my constituency. I have been the elected MP for Newlands for the past 4 years. I think I've managed to deliver on a large number of my manifesto promises, despite being an opposition bench, despite not having control of government budget, despite not actually having met with cabinet as according to the Constitution. Any member who is not represented in cabinet has an opportunity to meet with cabinet once a quarter. Didn't have any of those meetings. Despite COVID and all of the negatives that came with COVID, I've still managed to deliver. I have been going door to door to visit my constituents. They know what I've done. They know that they have improved street lighting on the east-west arterial. They have an improved drainage system, which needs more work, but they've had that addressed. They have improved lighting in their neighborhoods. They have improved services at the Bordentown Clinic. They have improved services at the Bordentown Police Station. They have better public transportation in Newlands. They actually have infrastructure and road improvements. 16 major streets have been upgraded in Newlands. Support for our schools and students, both personally and through the government. I have supported Savannah Primary School. We have dealt with the King Tide flooding issue in Newlands. We had constituents who were losing cars, valuable property. That has been dealt with. The Newlands boat ramp has been resurfaced. Trailers are no longer getting damaged by the high crest on that boat ramp. COVID support. I worked wholeheartedly with the government and the opposition to give the people of Newlands all the support they needed to get through COVID. We now have a hurricane shelter that is Cat 5 capable, that is now being constructed and finished for the people of Bordentown. Those are just some of the things that I've managed to do from the opposition bench. My focus is going to be a seat in cabinet, to step up the level of representation that I'm giving to my constituents. I think I need to do that from a seat in cabinet, and I think I'm now ready for it. I have represented this country globally, internationally. I have gone to the FCO and negotiated a new constitution for the people of the Cayman Islands, along with the government team and the former leader of the opposition, Mr. Miller. I have accomplished a lot in just 2 terms for this country, and I plan to do much, much more. Thank you.
Thank the candidates. Well done. We got through another forum, so it's now up to the voters of Newlands to decide. I'm now going to turn it over to President Mike Gibbs to deliver some closing statements.
Thank you, Will. On behalf of the Chamber Council and staff, I would like to thank the Newlands candidates for participating in this evening's forum. I trust that the forum will help the Newlands voters to determine who to vote for when you go to the polls on the 14th of April. I'd also like to thank Foster's for their major sponsorship of the Chamber's candidate forums, as well as Affinity, Bodden Legal and Corporate, and DART. If you're interested in viewing more of the Growth Matters video series that have been playing during tonight's commercial breaks, they can be accessed at the growthmatters.ky website. Please join us Monday evening as we welcome the candidates from the constituency of Red Bay, Samuel Jackson and Alden McLaughlin. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you will join us Monday evening at the same time. Good night.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right, and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.